Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, June 1960. 5 police officers climbed the stairs of the brick apartment building on Morewood Avenue. Detective Clement Hargrove carried the search warrant in his coat pocket, along with something else: a handwritten list of 17 names. In 20 minutes, they would knock on the door of apartment 3B, home to Constance Miriam Farnsworth, a pediatric nurse at Oakland Children's Health Clinic. For 16 years she had worked there. Children smiled when they saw her. Mothers requested her specifically for their appointments. Colleagues praised her dedication. Nobody knew that every shift she worked was a crime scene. 17 children, 17 deaths, 16 years, and nobody suspected a thing. The officers moved quietly up the worn wooden stairs, their footsteps muffled by threadbare carpet. Hargrove glanced at the younger officers: Matthews, Rodriguez, Sullivan, O'Brien. Good men, solid police work, but none of them had seen anything like this before. Truth be told, neither had Hargrove. 32 years on the force, and he'd investigated murders, robberies, assaults, everything Pittsburgh streets could produce. But this? A nurse systematically poisoning children over 16 years? It defied belief. Even now, with evidence in hand, warrant in pocket, confession recorded, part of him still struggled to accept it. January 1944. Oakland District, Pittsburgh. The Oakland Children's Health Clinic opened its doors during the coldest winter Pittsburgh had seen in decades. Snow piled 6 feet high along Forbes Avenue. The Monongahela River froze solid for the first time since 1918. The war in Europe consumed the nation's attention. Young men shipped overseas, factories converted to munitions production, rationing books distributed at post offices. Against this backdrop of global conflict and domestic sacrifice, the new clinic represented hope, investment in the future, care for the next generation who would inherit whatever world emerged from the war's ashes. The new facility was built with wartime efficiency: 3 stories of white limestone, wide hallways designed for stretcher transport, large windows to maximize natural light during blackouts, examination rooms equipped with the latest equipment that hadn't been requisitioned for military hospitals. The building occupied a corner lot at the intersection of 5th Avenue and Bouquet Street, convenient to the streetcar lines that working families used. The first floor housed reception, records, and general pediatrics. The second floor contained treatment rooms, laboratories, and a small pharmacy. The third floor held administrative offices and a staff lounge. Everything gleamed: fresh paint, polished floors, new equipment still wrapped in protective paper. Dr. Archibald Montgomery Fletcher, the chief physician, personally interviewed every prospective employee. Fletcher was a Pittsburgh institution. 58 years old, graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, veteran of the Great War where he'd served as a field surgeon in France. He'd returned from that war with shrapnel scars and an unshakable commitment to preventing unnecessary death. He believed passionately that children deserved the best medical care available, regardless of their family's ability to pay. The clinic operated on a sliding scale. Wealthy families from Shadyside paid full rates. Working-class families from Oakland paid what they could. Poor families paid nothing. Fletcher subsidized the difference from his own inherited wealth. He ran the clinic like a ship: tight discipline, high standards, zero tolerance for incompetence or negligence. When Constance Miriam Farnsworth appeared before him for her interview on a gray January afternoon, Fletcher immediately noted her steady gaze and precise movements. She sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, answering questions in a clear, measured voice. 19 years old. Graduate of the Pittsburgh School of Nursing, class of 1943. 5th in her class of 42 students. Her references were impeccable. She'd completed her clinical rotation at Magee Women's Hospital, where the supervising nurses praised her attention to detail and sterile technique. __quote _0__, wrote head nurse Margaret Sullivan. __quote _1__, Fletcher asked about her background. Constance explained she'd grown up in Wilkinsburg, a working-class suburb east of the city. Father worked as a machinist at Westinghouse. Mother died when Constance was 12. Cancer. No siblings. She'd helped care for her mother during the final illness, which sparked her interest in nursing. After her mother's death, she and her father lived quietly together until she started nursing school. Her father had died the previous year, heart attack at age 49. She was alone now. No family. Fletcher noted the flatness in her voice when she described these losses. No grief, no emotion, just facts delivered in neutral tones. He attributed it to composure, professional demeanor, self-control in the face of tragedy. When Fletcher asked why she wanted to work in pediatrics, she answered without hesitation. "I have a gift for calming children. I want to use it to help them heal." She explained that during her clinical rotation, she'd noticed how frightened children became during medical procedures. Quote 3, quote, she said. Quote 4, quote. Fletcher was impressed. He asked technical questions about pediatric nursing procedures. She answered every one correctly, precisely, demonstrating comprehensive knowledge. He asked about hypothetical scenarios. What would you do if a child had an allergic reaction during vaccination? How would you handle a parent who refused necessary treatment for their child? What's the proper protocol for documenting medication administration? Her answers were textbook perfect. She clearly understood both the medical and ethical dimensions of nursing practice. Fletcher signed her employment contract. Constance became a treatment room nurse. Her responsibilities included administering injections, drawing blood samples, setting up IV drips, dressing wounds, taking temperatures, weighing infants, sterilizing equipment, maintaining supply inventory. The work demanded precision and patience. She possessed both in abundance. 1944 to 1948. The perfect nurse. The first years passed without incident. Constance quickly earned her colleagues' trust. She arrived every morning at exactly 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her shift started, changed into her uniform, crisp white dress, white stockings, white shoes, white cap with the nursing school pin. At precisely 6 a.m., she was at her station, ready to work. She never arrived late. Not once in 4 years. She never called in sick. Even during the brutal flu season of 1946, when half the staff was bedridden, Constance worked every scheduled shift. She never complained about the long hours, often 10 or 12 hours when they were short-staffed. She volunteered for extra shifts when other nurses needed time off for family obligations or personal matters. Children genuinely seemed calmer in her presence than with other staff members. Other nurses noticed this immediately. When a screaming toddler was brought in for vaccinations, they'd call for Constance. She'd appear, kneel down to the child's level, produce a small wooden toy from her pocket. A car, a doll, an animal figure. "Look at this," she'd say in her gentle voice. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 6, underscore, underscore. The child would focus on the toy, distracted from their fear. Constance would administer the injection while maintaining the distraction. Often, the child didn't even realize they'd been stuck until it was over. She had a repertoire of songs she'd hum, popular radio tunes, nursery rhymes, hymns. Her voice was pleasant, soothing. She'd speak in a gentle tone that seemed to hypnotize children into cooperation. Parents thanked her profusely. Quote 7, quote, they'd say, "My son usually screams bloody murder for shots, but he barely flinched with you. You have such a way with children. I wish all nurses were like you." Constance would smile modestly, deflect the praise. "I'm just doing my job," she'd respond. Quote 12. The parents would leave convinced they'd encountered a truly special person, someone who genuinely loved children, who had dedicated her life to their well-being. Doctors valued her professionalism. She never confused medication orders, never administered the wrong dose, never contaminated sterile equipment. Her treatment room was organized with military precision, instruments arranged by type and size, medications stored alphabetically, Supplies inventoried and restocked daily. Dr. Fletcher conducted surprise inspections periodically. Constance's station always passed with perfect marks. Other nurses' stations might have minor violations, a medication vial out of place, an instrument tray not quite sterile, documentation slightly delayed. Never Constance. Her record was spotless. Dr. Fletcher held her up as an example to newer hires. "Miss Farnsworth represents the standard we expect," he'd say during staff meetings. Quote_14. Quote, "The other nurses didn't resent this praise. They genuinely admired Constance. She was unfailingly polite to everyone. She helped colleagues when they fell behind. She covered shifts without complaint. She shared credit for successes and took responsibility for any team failures, even when they weren't her fault." By 1948, Constance had been promoted to senior treatment room nurse. The position came with a small raise, from $32 to $38 per week, and additional responsibilities. She now supervised 3 junior nurses, managed equipment ordering, coordinated the treatment schedule, and served as Fletcher's assistant for complex procedures. She received the hospital's Excellence in Patient Care Award at the annual staff dinner. Fletcher presented the plaque personally, praising her quote, quote, "Constance accepted with characteristic modesty. Quote, 16, quote, she said. Quote, 17, quote. Her personnel file contained nothing but commendations. Quote, year after year, perfect evaluations. No disciplinary actions, no complaints, no concerns. She was the model employee. Her personal life was unremarkable and almost invisible. She lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment on Morewood Avenue, 3rd floor of a modest brick building, rent $28 per month. The apartment was spare, almost monastic. A narrow bed with white sheets, a small dresser, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a radio, bookshelves filled with nursing textbooks and medical journals. No decorations, no photographs, no personal mementos. The landlady, Mrs. Kowalski, described Constance as the perfect tenant. __quote_22__. Constance never married. Never dated as far as anyone knew. No romantic relationships, no close friendships. She attended Presbyterian services at Shadyside Church every Sunday at 10 a.m., sitting alone in the back pew. She never joined the Women's Auxiliary or any church committees. She'd arrive exactly 5 minutes before the service started, sit quietly through the sermon, leave immediately when it ended. The pastor, Reverend Thornton, barely knew her name. Quote, 23, he said later when investigators asked about her. Quote, 24. Her weekday evenings and Saturday afternoons followed an invariable routine. She'd return to her apartment after work, prepare a simple meal, usually soup and bread, occasionally a boiled egg or canned vegetables. She'd eat alone at her table, wash her single plate and cup, then spend the evening reading nursing journals. The Journal of Pediatrics, Nursing Research Quarterly, American Journal of Nursing. She subscribed to all of them, read every issue cover to cover, took detailed notes in small notebooks. Occasionally, she'd listen to radio programs, news broadcasts, classical music, medical lectures on educational stations. She'd go to bed at exactly 9 p.m., sleep 7 hours, wake at 4 a.m. to prepare for work. She had no hobbies, no social clubs, no recreational activities. Didn't attend movies or concerts, didn't go to restaurants or bars, didn't visit museums or parks except for occasional brief walks on Sunday afternoons, didn't own a car or bicycle, took the streetcar to work every day, the same route, the same seat if possible, barely acknowledging other passengers. The conductor on her regular line, Jimmy O'Malley, later told investigators, "She rode my car 5 days a week for years. I couldn't tell you a single thing about her personality. She'd board, drop her nickel in the fare box, sit in the same seat, stare out the window, get off at Oakland. Never said good morning, never complained about delays, never smiled, just existed." Neighbors described her identically. Quiet, polite, reserved, kept to herself. Mrs. Kowalski tried to engage her in conversation occasionally. "How was your day, dear?" "Fine, thank you." "Lovely weather we're having." "Yes, quite nice." The conversations never went beyond these pleasantries. Constance would excuse herself politely and retreat to her apartment. She existed like a shadow, present but not really there, occupying space without making an impression, moving through the world without leaving traces. Looking back later, after everything came to light, people would wonder if there were warning signs, some deeply hidden darkness that leaked through occasionally. But there wasn't. Constance presented no red flags, no troubling behaviors, no concerning incidents. She was the perfect nurse, the perfect employee, the perfect tenant, the perfect churchgoer. Unremarkable in every way except her exceptional professional competence. That was the most terrifying aspect. There was nothing to notice, nothing to question, nothing to investigate. Evil wearing the most ordinary face imaginable. 1950, the first anomaly. A notation appeared in the clinic's files that nobody noticed at the time. A 4-year-old boy named Lawrence Hemmings, son of a steel mill foreman named Donald Hemmings and his wife Barbara, was admitted to Children's Hospital with severe poisoning of unknown origin. Lawrence had been a healthy, energetic child. Bright blue eyes, blonde curls, infectious laugh. His parents adored him. Their only child after years of trying to conceive. Donald worked grueling shifts at Jones and Laughlin Steel, but he always made time to play catch with Lawrence in the evenings. Barbara kept a meticulous home, cooked nutritious meals, read to Lawrence every night before bed. The illness started suddenly. One morning, Lawrence woke up vomiting. Barbara assumed it was a stomach bug. They went around the neighborhood regularly. She gave him ginger ale and crackers, kept him home from nursery school. But he didn't improve. The vomiting continued. By evening, he was lethargic, barely responsive. Barbara called Dr. Fletcher in panic. Fletcher told her to bring Lawrence to the hospital immediately. The emergency room doctors were baffled. Lawrence's symptoms were severe but nonspecific. Vomiting, abdominal pain, weakness, confusion. They ran blood tests. Liver enzymes elevated, kidney function declining, white blood cell count abnormal. But no clear diagnosis, no obvious infection, no evidence of trauma. They admitted him to the pediatric ward, started IV fluids, administered medications to control the vomiting, monitored him closely. Over the next 3 days, Lawrence's condition stabilized somewhat. The vomiting decreased, his vital signs improved. The doctors still couldn't identify the cause, but the crisis seemed to be passing. They ran more tests, stool cultures, urine analysis, x-rays. Nothing revealed an obvious pathology. On the 4th day, Lawrence was discharged with instructions to follow up with his regular pediatrician if symptoms returned. 6 weeks later, he was back. Same symptoms, same sudden onset, same severity. Barbara was distraught. Quote, 34. Quote, she pleaded with the doctors. Quote, 35. Quote, they admitted Lawrence again, ran the same battery of tests, consulted with specialists. An infectious disease expert examined him, found no evidence of infection. A gastroenterologist performed an endoscopy, found mild inflammation but no structural abnormalities. A neurologist checked for seizure disorders, found nothing. The leading theory was some kind of rare metabolic disorder, maybe an enzyme deficiency, maybe a genetic condition. They treated him symptomatically, and again he improved. Again he was discharged. 10 weeks later, the 3rd episode occurred. This time, Lawrence arrived at the hospital in critical condition. His organs were failing. Despite aggressive intervention, dialysis, medications, mechanical ventilation, he deteriorated rapidly. On the 3rd day, his heart stopped. Resuscitation efforts failed. Lawrence Hemmings died at 6:23 a.m. on a rainy October morning. He was 4 years and 7 months old. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Marcus Feldman, the county's senior pathologist. Feldman had performed thousands of autopsies during his 30-year career. He'd seen every manner of death: accidents, murders, suicides, natural causes. He opened Lawrence's small body with professional detachment, carefully examining each organ, taking tissue samples, documenting findings. The results were puzzling. Widespread tissue damage, multi-organ failure, but the pattern didn't match any known disease. The final autopsy report stated, quote, 36 Donald and Barbara Hemmings were destroyed. Their only child, dead from a mysterious illness that doctors couldn't even name. Barbara blamed herself. Perhaps she'd fed him something contaminated. Perhaps she'd been careless with household chemicals. Perhaps she'd failed to notice some environmental hazard. She tortured herself with these thoughts. Donald tried to stay strong for her, but privately he was falling apart. He started drinking heavily after Lawrence's death. Within 2 years, he'd lost his job at the mill. Within 5 years, he and Barbara had divorced. Barbara moved to Ohio to live with her sister, trying to escape the memories. Donald descended into alcoholism, living in a series of boarding houses, working odd jobs when he could. The loss of their child destroyed them both. The case was filed away as a tragic medical mystery. Nobody checked which nurse had administered Lawrence's routine vaccinations at the clinic. Nobody verified who had conducted his wellness check procedures. Nobody questioned who had drawn his blood for testing. These were routine administrative details, not relevant to a mysterious medical condition. The connection between Lawrence's clinic visits and his mysterious illnesses never occurred to anyone. Constance continued working. Same perfect attendance. Same meticulous technique. Same gentle manner with children. She showed no reaction to Lawrence's death. When colleagues mentioned it, "Isn't it terrible about that little boy?" she responded with appropriate but measured sympathy. "Yes, very sad. Such a tragedy for the family." Then she returned to her work. No visible emotion. No sign that she'd been involved in any way. Because from her perspective, she hadn't done anything wrong. She'd simply satisfied an urge. Like scratching an itch. Like having a glass of water when thirsty. Natural. Necessary. Not worth remarking upon. 1952 to 1956. The pattern emerges. Over the next 4 years, 6 more children experienced similar mysterious illnesses. 3 died. 3 survived with permanent disabilities. Each case followed the same pattern: periodic hospitalizations, inexplicable symptoms, apparent stabilizations followed by sudden deteriorations. The medical establishment was completely baffled. Case 2. Margaret Stanton, age 5, daughter of a high school mathematics teacher. Started with unexplained weakness and nausea in March 1952. Hospitalized 3 times over 6 months. Developed severe kidney damage. Survived but required lifelong medical management. Now on permanent disability. Case 3. Thomas Brierly, age 3, son of a department store manager. Sudden onset of neurological symptoms in September 1952. Seizures, confusion, progressive weakness. Hospitalized twice. Died after the second hospitalization despite intensive care. Autopsy findings similar to Lawrence Hemmings. Multi-organ damage from unknown toxin. Case 4. Susan Kowalski, age 6, daughter of a factory worker. Began experiencing digestive problems and fatigue in January 1953. Multiple hospitalizations over 8 months. Developed chronic liver damage. Survived but with permanent hepatic insufficiency, requiring lifelong monitoring and dietary restrictions. Case 5. Robert Chen, age 4, son of a restaurant owner. Presented with severe abdominal pain and vomiting in May 1953. 2 hospitalizations. Died during the second admission. His parents, immigrants from China, faced additional trauma. Some hospital staff wondered if, quote, 39 might be responsible. The subtle racism added insult to their devastating loss. Case 6. Patricia Morrison, age 7, daughter of a postal worker. Started showing symptoms in November 1954. weakness, pain, cognitive difficulties. 3 hospitalizations over a year. Survived, but with permanent neurological damage affecting her memory and motor skills. Required special education and could never live independently. Case 7. Daniel Kowalski, no relation to Susan, age 5, son of an electrician. Mysterious illness beginning in April 1955. 1 hospitalization. Died within a week of admission. Rapid organ failure. Autopsy findings consistent with toxic exposure, but no toxin identified. The medical community struggled to understand these cases. Pediatricians consulted with toxicologists, infectious disease specialists, geneticists, environmental health experts. They proposed numerous theories. Genetic metabolic disorders. Could these children share some rare inherited condition? But they weren't related. Their family histories showed no common genetic links. This theory was abandoned. Environmental contaminants. Was something in Pittsburgh's air or water causing these illnesses? The city's industrial pollution was notorious. Steel mills belched smoke, chemical plants discharged waste, coal dust settled everywhere. Investigators examined water quality, air samples, soil testing. Found elevated pollutants, but nothing that could explain this specific pattern of symptoms. Tainted food supply. Could contaminated milk or meat be responsible? Health inspectors examined dairy suppliers, meat processors, grocery stores. They found minor violations here and there. Nothing serious, nothing that could cause these severe poisonings. Infectious disease. Could this be some new pathogen? Epidemiologists studied the cases, looking for transmission patterns. But the children had no contact with each other. Their illnesses occurred at different times in different locations. No infections spread this way. Nutritional deficiencies. Some doctors wondered if post-war food rationing had created vitamin or mineral deficiencies that manifested in strange ways. But these children came from families that could afford adequate nutrition. Their diets were normal. The families of these children were strangers to each other. They lived in different neighborhoods: Oakland, Shadyside, Squirrel Hill, East Liberty, Bloomfield. They worked in different industries: education, retail, food service, manufacturing, civil service. They attended different churches. Their children went to different schools. The only connection was Oakland Children's Health Clinic. But thousands of children received care there, and the vast majority thrived. The clinic served roughly 2,800 pediatric patients annually. 7 mysterious illnesses over 4 years. That was 0.25% of the patient population. Tragic, certainly, but statistically within normal parameters for a large urban pediatric practice. Dr. Fletcher was aware of these cases, of course. He reviewed each one personally, concerned about potential quality of care issues. But he found nothing wrong with the clinic's operations. The children had received appropriate routine care. Their mysterious illnesses developed after they left the clinic, at home, with their families. The illnesses seemed unrelated to clinical care. If anything, the clinic's careful documentation and prompt referrals to the hospital had probably saved some of these children's lives. Fletcher was satisfied that his facility bore no responsibility. The city's annual pediatric mortality statistics showed Oakland Children's Health Clinic with a slightly elevated rate compared to other facilities. 6.2 deaths per 1,000 patients versus a city average of 4.8 per 1,000. But this wasn't dramatically higher. Statistical variation was normal. Different facilities served different populations with different risk factors. Fletcher's clinic served a working-class neighborhood where some families struggled with poverty, inadequate housing, and poor nutrition. These social determinants of health could easily account for the slightly elevated mortality rate. Nobody flagged it as suspicious. Constance continued her exemplary performance throughout this period. She received 2 more Excellence in Patient Care Awards, in 1953 and 1955. Her personnel file grew thicker with commendations. Dr. Fletcher relied on her increasingly to manage complex situations. When other nurses struggled with difficult children or challenging procedures, he'd send Constance. She always succeeded. Calm, competent, reassuring, the perfect nurse. Behind this facade, Constance was experiencing her compulsion with increasing frequency. The urge to harm, the need to poison. It wasn't constant, it came in waves. Sometimes she'd feel nothing for months, going about her work in a purely professional manner. Then she'd see a particular child, and the urge would strike. Overwhelming, undeniable. She described it later as similar to sexual arousal, a physical sensation that built in intensity, demanding satisfaction. When the urge hit, she couldn't resist. She'd make her selection, plan her method, execute carefully. Then afterward, she'd feel calm, satisfied, the tension released. She could function normally again until the next wave hit. She selected her victims with no discernible pattern. Not the prettiest children, not the most annoying, not any particular age or gender or race, just whichever child triggered the urge. She couldn't explain the selection criteria. It was instinctive, not rational. Like a predator selecting prey based on imperceptible cues. A particular scent, a certain movement, an undefined vulnerability. She'd see a child and something inside her would whisper, "This one." And that child's fate was sealed. Her methods were careful and varied. Usually small doses of sodium arsenite administered with routine injections. She'd prepare the regular vaccine or medication, then add a precisely measured amount of poison from the vial she kept in a personal locker. Not enough to kill immediately, that would be too obvious. Just enough to make the child sick. If the sickness satisfied her urge, she'd stop. The child would recover. If the urge persisted, she'd find an opportunity for a second dose. Sometimes a third. Some children died. Some survived with permanent damage. Some recovered completely, carrying traces of arsenic in their bodies but exhibiting no obvious symptoms. She didn't particularly care about the outcome. The satisfaction came from the act itself, not the result. She was extraordinarily careful to avoid patterns. She never targeted children from the same family, never administered poison to consecutive patients in a day, never created clusters of illnesses that might attract attention. She spaced out her attacks irregularly, sometimes 2 victims in a month, then nothing for 6 months. Sometimes hitting children who saw different doctors in the clinic, so no single physician would notice a pattern in their own caseload. She varied her methods slightly, sometimes arsenic in vaccines, sometimes in vitamin supplements she recommended to parents, occasionally in IV medications during hospital visits when she volunteered to help on the pediatric ward. She maintained perfect documentation for every legitimate procedure, creating a paper trail that showed exemplary care. And it worked. For 16 years, it worked. Nobody suspected. Nobody investigated. Nobody connected the dots. 7 children sick or dead by 1956, and the only reaction was medical puzzlement and parental grief. No criminal investigation. No systematic review of clinic procedures. No scrutiny of staff members. Just tragedy, mystery, and ultimately, acceptance. Some children get sick. Some children die. Medicine has limits. Doctors don't know everything. These were the comforting narratives that allowed everyone to move forward without asking uncomfortable questions. Questions like, could someone be doing this deliberately? Could someone we trust be betraying that trust? Could evil hide behind a nurse's uniform and a gentle smile? Those questions were too disturbing to contemplate. Easier to believe in mystery than in malevolence. August 1959. Dr. Driscoll arrives. Dr. Warren Ellis Driscoll joined the clinic staff on a sweltering August morning. 27 years old, fresh from his residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. The young physician approached medicine with missionary zeal. He'd grown up poor in Homestead, son of a steelworker who'd lost an arm in an industrial accident and struggled with alcoholism afterward. Warren had watched his father decline, seen how poverty and lack of access to quality healthcare created cascading failures. He'd earned his way through college at the University of Pittsburgh on full scholarship, then medical school on a combination of loans and stipends. He graduated second in his class, could have pursued lucrative private practice. Instead, he chose pediatrics in an underserved community. He believed passionately that quality healthcare was a fundamental right, not a privilege for the wealthy. Fletcher assigned him to the Oakland Shadyside district, working-class neighborhoods, young families, high birth rates. His caseload would include approximately 380 children, ranging from newborns to teenagers. Driscoll approached this responsibility with obsessive thoroughness. He requested all 380 patient files and spent his first 2 weeks reading every one. He memorized names, faces from photographs, medical histories, family circumstances. Other doctors teased him. __quote_40__, warned Dr. Howard Sterling, a cynical veteran of 20 years. __quote_41__. But Driscoll refused to adopt that attitude. He genuinely loved the work, believed he could make a difference. Each child mattered. Each case deserved his full attention. He maintained detailed clinical notes, not just symptoms and treatments, but observations about family dynamics, housing conditions, nutritional status, developmental progress. He'd spend 30 minutes on appointments that other doctors rushed through in 10. He'd follow up personally with families after hospitalizations. He'd make house calls when children couldn't get to the clinic. His dedication was exhausting but authentic. The first months were routine. Standard pediatric practice: strep throat, measles, chickenpox, routine checkups, vaccinations, minor injuries. Driscoll adapted quickly, built rapport with families in his district. They appreciated his thoroughness, his genuine interest in their children's welfare. Word spread. Dr. Driscoll actually listens, doctor. Driscoll takes time to explain things. Dr. Driscoll cares. His appointment slots filled quickly. Constance Farnsworth worked on his service. He immediately appreciated her competence. She administered injections smoothly and painlessly. She never confused medication orders. Her treatment room was organized with military precision. She had an excellent manner with children. They trusted her, cooperated with her. Driscoll was pleased. A skilled nurse made everything easier. He noticed how other staff members relied on Constance, how Dr. Fletcher praised her repeatedly. Driscoll made a mental note to express his appreciation. Good nurses deserved recognition. During his first month, Driscoll treated 19 children who'd recently had routine vaccinations or blood draws administered by Constance. All 19 recovered normally. No complications. He had no reason to suspect anything unusual. Constance was simply an excellent nurse doing excellent work. November 1959. The warning sign. A mother named Helen Pritchard brought her 5-year-old daughter Eleanor for an appointment. Eleanor appeared lethargic, pale, complaining of stomach pain. No fever. Driscoll conducted a thorough examination: abdomen soft and non-tender, throat clear, lungs normal, reflexes normal, heart sounds normal. No obvious signs of acute illness. But Driscoll trusted mother's instincts. Helen insisted something was wrong. Eleanor was usually energetic, talkative, active. This lethargy was abnormal. Driscoll ordered comprehensive blood and urine tests, recommended a bland diet and close observation. "Call me immediately if she worsens," he told Helen. "Don't wait. If you're worried, call." Helen thanked him, relieved that someone was taking her concerns seriously. 7 days later, Helen called in panic. Eleanor had worsened dramatically. She was vomiting. She'd had a seizure that morning. Driscoll told Helen to meet him at Children's Hospital emergency room immediately. He called ahead, alerting the ER staff. When Helen arrived with Eleanor, Driscoll was waiting. Eleanor was barely conscious, unresponsive to verbal commands. Driscoll ordered immediate admission. Pediatric ward, full workup, IV fluids, anti-seizure medications, consultation with neurology and toxicology. The hospital staff ran dozens of tests over the next 48 hours. Blood chemistry, toxicology screen, lumbar puncture, EEG, brain imaging. The results were confusing. Elevated liver enzymes, abnormal kidney function, signs of systemic inflammation, but no clear diagnosis. The toxicology screen checked for common poisons, barbiturates, opiates, alcohol, lead, mercury, all negative. Eleanor was treated symptomatically. Over 2 weeks, she stabilized somewhat. The seizures stopped. Her mental status improved. She was discharged with instructions for close outpatient follow-up. 5 weeks later, Eleanor was readmitted. Same symptoms, same sudden deterioration. This time, Driscoll was deeply troubled. He began reviewing Eleanor's complete medical history. Routine care at Oakland Children's Health Clinic since birth. Regular checkups. Vaccinations on schedule. No history of serious illness until 2 months ago. What had changed? He checked his own records. He'd seen Eleanor 3 months ago for her 5-year checkup. Perfectly healthy. Constance had administered her scheduled vaccinations. Driscoll had noted in the chart, quote, 44 __. Wait. Had Eleanor's illness started after that vaccination appointment? Driscoll checked dates. Checkup on September 12th. First illness symptoms on November 3rd. 7 weeks apart. Could there be a connection? Probably not. Vaccine reactions occurred within days, not weeks. But Driscoll was methodical. He started pulling files on other recent patients, looking for patterns. He discovered the case of 3-year-old Timothy Walsh. Same pattern. Unexplained episodes of severe illness, multiple hospitalizations, temporary improvements, sudden final deterioration. Timothy had died 4 months earlier, in July 1959. Driscoll hadn't been Timothy's physician. The child had been under Dr. Sterling's care. But the file remained in the district archive. Driscoll read through it carefully. Timothy had been a healthy toddler until March 1959. Then, mysterious illness. Hospitalization. Apparent recovery. Second episode in May. Third in July. This one fatal. Driscoll cross-referenced Timothy's clinic visits. Regular appointments. Routine care. Vaccinations administered by Constance Farnsworth on February 15th, April 22nd, and July 1st. The final vaccination occurred 2 weeks before Timothy's fatal illness. Was this significant? Driscoll didn't know. Maybe coincidence, but he kept searching. That evening, Driscoll stayed late at the clinic. The staff had gone home. The building was quiet. He sat in the records room, pulling file after file. His district had 380 active patients. He went through all of them, looking for any unusual patterns of illness. Most files showed routine pediatric care, minor illnesses, normal development, occasional injuries. But he found 8 files that troubled him. 8 children who had experienced serious, unexplained medical crises over the past 4 years. 3 had died. Timothy Walsh, July 1959. Daniel Kowalski, April 1955. Lawrence Hemmings, October 1950. 5 had survived with varying degrees of permanent damage. Eleanor Pritchard, currently hospitalized. Patricia Morrison, neurological impairment. Susan Kowalski, liver damage. Margaret Stanton, kidney disease. Robert Chen, deceased. Driscoll corrected himself, finding the death certificate in Robert's file from 1953. 4 deaths, 4 survivors with disabilities. 8 children total from his district alone. Driscoll felt cold. He created a detailed chart, marked dates of illness onset, hospitalization admissions, clinic visits. Then he did something unusual. He cross-referenced which staff members had been on duty during each child's routine appointments in the months preceding their mysterious illnesses. The pattern emerged slowly at first, then with shocking clarity. One name appeared with disturbing frequency: Constance Farnsworth. Not every time, that would be too obvious, but for 7 of the 8 cases, Constance had administered routine procedures, vaccinations, blood draws, vitamin injections, within 8 weeks before the onset of mysterious illness. The eighth case, Margaret Stanton, had also been treated by Constance, but the timing was less precise. 4 months between procedure and illness onset. Driscoll felt ice forming in his stomach. He didn't want to believe what his data suggested. The implications were monstrous. Constance Farnsworth was a respected colleague, a dedicated professional, an exemplary nurse. The idea that she could be deliberately harming children? It was insane. Impossible. His data had to be wrong. He must be seeing patterns where none existed. This was the danger of looking too hard for explanations. You started finding connections that were purely coincidental. But Driscoll was a scientist. He understood statistics. The probability of Constance being involved in 7 out of 8 cases by pure chance was incredibly low. He ran rough calculations. The clinic employed 6 nurses who administered treatments. If procedures were randomly distributed among staff, each nurse should appear in approximately 16.7% of cases. But Constance appeared in 87.5% of these mysterious illness cases. The statistical significance was overwhelming. Still, correlation wasn't causation. Maybe Constance worked more shifts than other nurses. Maybe she handled more of the routine procedures because she was senior staff. Maybe she was assigned the more complex cases because of her experience. Driscoll checked the employment records. Constance worked the same 40-hour weekly schedule as other senior nurses. She wasn't assigned specific types of cases. Procedures were distributed based on which nurse was available when a child needed treatment. Driscoll's hands were shaking. He looked at the files spread across the table. 8 children, 4 dead, 4 with permanent disabilities, and 1 name appearing again and again in the documentation. Could this be real? Could a nurse at this clinic be poisoning children? The thought was almost incomprehensible. But the data. He needed to tell someone, show them what he'd found, get another perspective, make sure he wasn't seeing phantoms. The obvious choice was Dr. Fletcher. The chief physician needed to know about this immediately. The confrontation with Fletcher. The next morning, Driscoll requested an urgent meeting with Dr. Fletcher. Fletcher's secretary, a formidable woman named Agnes who'd worked for Fletcher for 20 years, raised an eyebrow. Urgent? What's the nature of the emergency? Driscoll hesitated. How to explain without sounding insane? I've discovered a pattern in patient outcomes that requires immediate discussion. It's sensitive. Agnes studied him for a moment, then nodded. Dr. Fletcher has 15 minutes at 11:30. Don't be late. Driscoll arrived at 11:28, carrying his charts and documentation. Fletcher's office was exactly what you'd expect. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, medical texts lining the shelves, framed diplomas on the walls. Fletcher sat behind his massive oak desk, reading a medical journal. He looked up when Driscoll entered. Dr. Driscoll, Agnes said you have something urgent. Driscoll laid out his evidence, explained his investigation, showed the charts, demonstrated the statistical correlation, walked through each case methodically. Fletcher listened in silence, his expression growing harder with each revelation. When Driscoll finished, Fletcher sat back in his chair. A long silence filled the room. Finally, Fletcher spoke. Dr. Driscoll, do you understand what you're suggesting? Yes, sir. I know it sounds... You're accusing Miss Farnsworth of serial murder. I'm presenting data that suggests... Data that shows correlation, not causation. You're a young physician, Dr. Driscoll. You haven't yet learned that medicine is full of unexplained patterns. Sometimes children get sick. Sometimes they die. It's tragic, but it's reality. Sir, the statistical probability. Statistics can be misleading, especially in small sample sizes. 8 cases over 9 years? That's not enough to establish meaningful patterns. But the correlation with Constance's involvement. Miss Farnsworth is our most experienced treatment room nurse. Of course she's involved in more cases. She's been here since we opened. She handles more procedures than anyone else. Naturally, her name appears frequently in patient records. I checked the employment data. She doesn't work more hours than other senior nurses. Her experience means she's called for difficult cases, cases that are already complicated, cases where children may have underlying health problems we haven't identified yet. The correlation you're seeing is selection bias, not causation. Driscoll tried a different approach. Sir, if there's even a possibility, there's no possibility. Fletcher's voice turned hard. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 62, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 63, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 64, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 65, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 66, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 67, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 68, underscore, underscore. Fletcher stood, signaling the meeting was over. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 69, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 70, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 71, underscore, underscore. Driscoll left Fletcher's office feeling shaken, but also resolved. Fletcher's refusal to even consider the possibility troubled him deeply. Was it loyalty to a valued employee? Fear of scandal? Or something else? An unwillingness to believe that such horror could exist in his own clinic? Driscoll made a decision. He would continue investigating. Quietly. Carefully. He'd watch Constance. Document everything. Build a case so strong that Fletcher couldn't dismiss it. It was dangerous. If Fletcher found out, Driscoll's career would be over. But children's lives were at stake. That mattered more than his career. December 1959. The trap. Driscoll started watching Constance, discreetly. He paid attention to which children she treated. He began making excuses to be present in the treatment room during procedures. He noticed small things. The way she sometimes spent an extra moment alone with certain patients. The way she occasionally administered injections while positioned so her body blocked the view of parents. The way certain children who seemed perfectly healthy during appointments became mysteriously ill within days. He kept meticulous records in a private notebook. Not official medical records. Those could be accessed by other staff. Personal notes he kept in his locked desk drawer. Dates, times, patients, procedures, observations. He was building documentation. Then Russell Caldwell came in. 6 years old, bright, healthy, energetic. Son of Edward and Martha Caldwell. Edward worked as an accountant. Martha taught piano lessons from their home. Russell was scheduled for a routine booster vaccination. Driscoll conducted the preliminary examination. Everything perfectly normal. Healthy child, no concerns. He sent Russell to the treatment room for his injection. Constance was on duty. As Russell and his mother walked down the hall, Driscoll had a sudden intuition. He couldn't explain it. Call it instinct. Call it pattern recognition. Call it divine intervention. But something told him this was significant. He followed them. Stood in the doorway of the treatment room. Watched as Constance prepared the syringe. She noticed him watching. Her expression didn't change. Didn't show surprise or concern. Just professional neutrality. She administered the injection perfectly. Textbook technique. Russell barely flinched. Martha thanked Constance profusely. They left. Driscoll examined the treatment room after they departed. Everything was in order. Medication vials properly stored and labeled. Sharps containers sealed according to protocol. Waste bin empty except for routine disposal items. He found nothing suspicious. He felt foolish. Paranoid. Maybe Fletcher was right. Maybe he was seeing monsters where none existed. 3 days later, Russell was admitted to Children's Hospital with acute poisoning. Driscoll knew. The intuition had been right. But knowing wasn't enough. He needed proof. The illegal search. Driscoll made a decision that night that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A decision that violated every ethical principle he'd been taught. a decision that could destroy his career and land him in prison, but a decision he believed was necessary to save lives. He returned to the clinic late at night. He had a key. Senior physicians could access the building after hours for emergencies. This wasn't an emergency. This was breaking and entering with intent to commit theft. He knew exactly what he was doing. He chose to do it anyway. The building was dark and silent. His footsteps echoed on the tile floors. He went to the treatment room first, examined every medication vial under the harsh fluorescent lights, checked lot numbers against inventory records. Everything matched. Everything was legitimate. He found nothing suspicious. Then he went to the staff locker room. He knew this crossed a line. Opening another staff member's personal locker without permission was a clear violation. If caught, he'd be arrested. He didn't care. He opened Constance's locker. Inside, her spare uniform neatly folded, her nursing school textbooks, obviously well-read and annotated, a small mirror, a comb, a packet of bobby pins, a black cardigan for cool weather. Everything ordinary, everything normal. He almost gave up, almost closed the locker and left, almost convinced himself he was wrong about everything. Then he noticed the false bottom, a piece of cardboard cut to fit the locker floor but slightly raised. Underneath, a small leather case, worn but well-maintained. He opened it. Inside were 3 unlabeled glass vials containing clear liquid. No markings, no labels, just clear liquid in medical vials. His heart pounded. This was it. This was the evidence. He took one vial, left the other 2, carefully replaced the false bottom, closed the locker, left everything else exactly as he'd found it. He walked out of the clinic with the vial in his coat pocket, knowing he'd just committed multiple crimes, knowing it was worth it. The next morning, he took the vial to Dr. Leonard Ashworth, a colleague from medical school who now worked in the toxicology laboratory at the University of Pittsburgh Medical School. "Len, I need a favor. A confidential analysis. No questions asked." Ashworth looked at the vial, then at Driscoll's face. Quote, 73. Quote, 74. Ashworth hesitated, then nodded. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 75, underscore, underscore. The results came back. Sodium arsenite solution. Concentration approximately 1%. Highly toxic. A dose of 0.5 milliliters could make a child severely ill. A dose of 2 milliliters could be fatal. The vial contained approximately 15 milliliters, enough to poison dozens of children. Driscoll sat in Ashworth's office, staring at the analysis report. He felt sick. He'd been right. Constance Farnsworth was a murderer, had been for years, was probably responsible for deaths far beyond the 8 cases he'd identified. How many others hadn't he found? How many children across 16 years? Ashworth said quietly. Driscoll met his eyes. The police investigation. Driscoll went to the Pittsburgh Police Department headquarters on Forbes Avenue. It was a gray stone building, imposing and bureaucratic. He walked through the doors feeling like he was stepping off a cliff. No turning back now. He asked to speak with someone in the detective division, was directed to Detective Clement Hargrove. The desk sergeant said, quote, 87 Hargrove was 54 years old, weary-looking, deep lines in his face from 32 years of seeing humanity's worst aspects, sharp eyes that missed nothing, a reputation for tenacity. When Hargrove caught a case, he didn't let go until it was solved. He'd served in World War I, come home with shrapnel scars and a determination to make his city safer. He'd seen terrible things in France, thought nothing could shock him anymore. He was wrong. Driscoll sat across from Hargrove in a small interview room, laid out everything, the pattern of illnesses, the statistical correlations, the stolen vial, the toxicology results. Hargrove listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When Driscoll finished, Hargrove sat back and lit a cigarette. The smoke drifted toward the ceiling. Quote 88. Hargrove said finally. Quote 89. Quote 90. Quote 91. Quote 92. Quote 93. Quote 94. Quote 95. Quote 96. Quote 97. Driscoll looked at Hargrove directly. Quote 98. Hargrove studied him for a long moment, saw genuine conviction, genuine courage, the kind of courage that costs something. Quote 99. Quote 100. Quote 101. Quote 102. Quote 103. Over the next 4 hours, Driscoll walked Hargrove through the entire case. Every sick child, every death, every statistical correlation, every observation. Hargrove took detailed notes, asked probing questions, tested Driscoll's reasoning. By the end, he was convinced. "I'll open an investigation," Hargrove said. "But we do this right, by the book. Legal searches, proper warrants, admissible evidence. It'll take time." How much time? Weeks, maybe months. We need to build an airtight case. What about the children at the clinic? While we're building a case, she's still working, still has access. I'll speak with the clinic administration, request that she be temporarily suspended pending investigation. Dr. Fletcher refused to even consider. Dr. Fletcher isn't a police detective. He doesn't get to refuse. This is a criminal investigation now. Hargrove was true to his word. Within 24 hours, he'd obtained a warrant to search Constance's apartment. Found the leather case with 2 remaining vials. Perfectly legal to possess. No law against owning chemicals for personal use. But it established she had access to poison. He interviewed families of sick children, asked detailed questions about their clinic visits. Several parents mentioned that Miss Farnsworth had been particularly attentive to their children. Some recalled that she'd insisted on administering certain medications personally, even when other nurses were available. A few remembered that she'd recommended vitamin supplements. These will help your child stay healthy during flu season, and provided samples. The parents had trusted her, given the supplements to their children. Never suspected. Hargrove worked with a forensic accountant to analyze the clinic's patient records. They identified 43 children who had experienced unexplained illnesses over 16 years. 17 had died. 26 had survived with varying levels of permanent damage. The accountant created detailed timelines, cross-referenced with Constance's work schedule. The correlation was undeniable. Every single case occurred when Constance was on duty. Not a single case occurred during her vacations or sick days. The statistical probability of this being coincidence was essentially 0. But still, it wasn't direct proof of murder. It was circumstantial. Strong circumstantial evidence, but juries wanted more. They wanted smoking guns. They wanted confessions. Hargrove needed to push harder. The interrogation. Hargrove decided on a confrontational approach. He brought Constance in for questioning, told her it was routine, related to discrepancies in medication records. She came willingly, showing no signs of concern or anxiety. Sat in the interrogation room with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. Calm, composed, professional. Hargrove began gently, built rapport, asked about her background, her training, her career. She answered every question calmly, precisely. Her voice never wavered, her hands never trembled. She maintained eye contact without difficulty, showed no physiological signs of deception, no excessive blinking, no fidgeting, no defensive posture. Then Hargrove shifted. Quote 113, quote 114, quote 115, quote 116, quote 117, quote 118, quote 119, quote 120. Hargrove tried different angles, showed her the statistical analysis, played on her pride, appealed to her conscience, threatened her with evidence they had. Nothing worked. She had an answer for everything. Calm, rational, unflappable. Finally, Hargrove played his trump card. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 121, underscore, underscore. For the first time, the slightest flicker crossed her face, so brief that a less experienced interrogator might have missed it. But Hargrove saw it. Fear. Not guilt, not shame, just fear of being caught. Quote, 122. Quote, 123. A pause, barely perceptible. Then, quote, 124. Quote, 125. Quote, 126. Quote, 127. Quote, 128. Quote, 129. Quote, 130. Quote, 131. There, the flicker again, longer this time. Her hands tightened slightly on the edge of the table. Her breathing changed, just a fraction, but Hargrove noticed. She was scared now, really scared. Quote, quote, the interrogation continued for 6 hours. Constance never confessed, never broke, never showed more than those brief flickers of fear. She was remarkable, the most controlled suspect Hargrove had encountered in 3 decades of police work. But he'd seen the cracks, knew she was hiding something, knew exhumations would reveal it. He let her leave, but filed for exhumation orders immediately, needed court approval, needed to convince a judge that there was sufficient probable cause to disturb multiple graves. It took 3 weeks of legal maneuvering, but eventually Judge Harrison Caldwell, no relation to Russell, signed the orders. During those 3 weeks, Constance continued working at the clinic. Doctor. Fletcher had been informed of the investigation but refused to suspend her without concrete evidence. Innocent until proven guilty, he insisted. I won't destroy a nurse's career based on speculation. Driscoll watched her constantly, documented everything, followed her movements, noted which children she treated. No new cases of mysterious illness occurred during this period. Either she'd become extremely cautious or she'd stopped entirely. Driscoll didn't know which. The exhumations. The exhumations began in January 1960. 4 bodies: Lawrence Hemmings, Timothy Walsh, Daniel Kowalski, Robert Chen. The parents had to give consent. For some, it was a relief. Finally, maybe they'd get answers about why their children died. For others, it was torture, disturbing their baby's rest, forcing them to relive the trauma. The remains were sent to the Allegheny County Coroner's Office for forensic analysis. Doctor. Marcus Feldman, who'd performed the original autopsy on Lawrence Hemmings 10 years earlier, supervised the examinations. Modern toxicology methods could detect arsenic in hair, nails, bones, tissues that preserved chemical evidence long after death. The results were conclusive. All 4 children had elevated arsenic levels consistent with chronic poisoning. Not environmental exposure. The levels were too high, too concentrated. These children had been deliberately poisoned. Multiple doses administered over time, exactly as Driscoll had theorized. Hargrove had his evidence, obtained legally, scientifically validated, court admissible. He obtained an arrest warrant. On June 3, 1960, 5 officers climbed the stairs to Constance's apartment on Morewood Avenue. She opened the door calmly. Dressed in her nurse's uniform, preparing for her shift, she looked at the officers without surprise, as if she'd been expecting this. Miss Constance Miriam Farnsworth, you're under arrest for the murders of Lawrence Hemmings, Timothy Walsh, Daniel Kowalski, and Robert Chen. You have the right to remain silent. She didn't resist, didn't speak, simply extended her wrists for the handcuffs. As Hargrove secured them, she asked one question. How did you know? Not, why are you arresting me? Not, I'm innocent. Just, how did you know? The question of a predator who thought she'd covered her tracks perfectly. Quote, 140, Hargrove said. She nodded slowly. Quote, 141, a statement, not a question. Then, surprisingly, quote, 142. They took her to the station, read her rights again. Appointed attorney Robert Kenilworth, a public defender. Kenilworth advised silence. She ignored him. Kenilworth tried to stop her. She waved him off. She said. The room went silent. Kenilworth said urgently. She asked, looking at him with genuine curiosity. And she did. Over the next 4 hours, Constance provided a detailed confession that shocked even Hargrove's experienced team. She named 17 children she had murdered, described her methods with clinical precision. Small doses of sodium arsenide administered with routine injections, sometimes mixed with medications, occasionally added to vitamin supplements. She explained her selection criteria, random, based on intuition or mood. She described how she'd varied her patterns to avoid detection, never the same family twice, irregular timing, maintaining exemplary performance. She spoke without emotion, without remorse, as if describing a laboratory procedure. When interrogators asked why, her answer was chilling. Quote, 154, quote, 155, quote, 156, quote, 157, quote, 158. She considered the questions seriously. The confession was recorded, transcribed, signed. Kenilworth's objections noted for the record. The prosecutor's office began building its case. But they faced complications. The defense intended to argue insanity. Constance underwent 6 months of psychiatric evaluation. 3 separate psychiatrists examined her extensively. Their conclusions were remarkably consistent. She was not psychotic. No delusions, no hallucinations, no detachment from reality. She understood perfectly that her actions were illegal and condemned. She simply didn't care. Moral deficiency, one wrote. Profound absence of empathy, stated another. The third diagnosed psychopathic personality disorder with homicidal compulsion. All 3 agreed she was competent to stand trial. All 3 agreed she was sane by legal standards. She knew right from wrong. She simply chose wrong. The trial began in March 1961 and lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, forensic toxicology, statistical analysis, testimony from Dr. Driscoll and Detective Hargrove, parents' heartbreaking accounts, Constance's own recorded confession. The defense did what it could, challenged evidence admissibility, argued diminished capacity, presented psychiatric evaluations suggesting mental illness. But the jury wasn't convinced. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all 17 counts of first-degree murder. At sentencing, Judge Caldwell spoke for 20 minutes about the magnitude of evil, the betrayal of trust, the exploitation of innocence. He concluded, Pennsylvania had abolished the death penalty in 1958. Had it still existed, Constance would certainly have been executed. She was transported to the State Correctional Institution at Muncie, women's maximum security prison. She lived there for 43 years, died in 2003, heart failure, age 78. No family claimed her body. She was buried in the prison cemetery, grave marker bearing only her inmate number. Her crimes changed the American medical system. After her arrest, Pennsylvania implemented strict controls on medication inventory, required dual verification for toxic substance administration, mandated regular audits, established oversight committees, installed monitoring systems. Other states followed. The reforms came too late for 17 children who died and 26 who survived with disabilities. But they prevented future tragedies. The survivors carried lifelong scars. Eleanor Morrison became a nurse, dedicated to protecting children. Died at 44 from renal failure. Russell Caldwell suffered seizures his whole life, died at 57. Others struggled similarly. Lives marked by Constance's poison. Dr. Driscoll specialized in pediatric toxicology, spent his career studying poisoning patterns. Never forgot the 17 who died before he recognized the truth. Detective Hargrove taught criminal justice, using the Farnsworth case as a teaching example about following evidence wherever it leads. Today, 64 years later, the Oakland Children's Medical Center serves Pittsburgh with modern security systems and strict protocols. A memorial plaque honors the victims. In memory of the children lost to violence, 1944 to 1960. May their innocence be honored and their suffering never forgotten. Constance's employment records were sealed, her photograph removed from all displays. Better to remember victims than glorify perpetrators. But the lessons remain. Trust must be verified. Patterns deserve investigation. Speaking up requires courage but saves lives. Systems require constant improvement. Vigilance never ends. The Farnsworth case is a warning. Evil can hide anywhere. Even behind a gentle smile and a nurse's uniform. Even in hands meant to heal. The only defense is awareness, courage, action. Remember the 17 who died. Remember the 26 who suffered. Remember Dr. Driscoll who noticed. Remember Detective Hargrove who investigated. Remember the reforms that followed. Remember it happened. Remember it could happen again. Stay vigilant, always.